Everyone, you're looking at my backyard on a beautiful sunny blue sky day. It's a little shaky maybe, I don't have my stabilizer on, but I just wanted to show you what I'll be looking at. So we have a very long garden. Let me set you down here. We have a very long rectangular garden here at home, and I've tucked myself all the way in the back of it today, as far back as I can go, because the neighbors are home. There's a kid who will probably be out here running around making noise. There are renovations going on that our neighbors are partaking in. So I thought I'd bring myself all the way back here, and let's switch back to me. This is what I'm looking like today. I've got my coffee here. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. So basically, if you hear a little bit of noise in the background today, it's because it's a sunny day. People are getting stuff done. We're generally very lucky though in the backyard to have a lot of peace and quiet here. And it's just one of the many things to be grateful for. And I'm grateful for all of you live viewers that have showed up today. Some of these names keep coming back for the last 2.5 years. It's pretty incredible. So my appreciation goes out to you and my hat's off to you. The quarantine coif is still growing out. Now we're not technically under quarantine, but I'm still doing the home editions here because I haven't quite gone into Paris yet. That's coming very soon. People have started to ask me when I'm going to be back on the streets of Paris live, and it's going to happen soon for sure. I can feel it. Thanks everybody. You know, one thing that I want to do before we start episode number 87, there's something that I'm not doing enough in my world, and it's something that I wanted to start with today, and that's being in the moment. I spend way too much time, I don't know if you're the same, I spend all of my time thinking about what has either happened or what's about to happen, what I perceive is about to happen. And the same can go with these episodes, you know, because I'm live and there's a performance aspect, and I think about the things that I prepared and the things that I want to get done, the things that I don't want to screw up. I don't want to forget to say this and that. I want my delivery to be good. I want the technology to work out. I want my cafe creme to be hot enough, which it is, thank goodness. But what about just being in the moment? Like, I just want to take a breath, enjoy just being here, not worrying about what's the next thing I'm going to say, or how many people are live, how many people are going to watch my video. Let's just all be in the moment together, you know, just for a second. I think it's a beautiful blue day, blue sky day. So I just wanted to start with that. I don't know if that's cheesy, but I'm getting into more of a meditation vibe and realizing that being in the moment, in the present moment, and just appreciating where you are right now is important. And I think would help me in general as a content creator when I'm live like this, you know. Okay, so welcome to number 87. Speaking of being in the moment, I can see all of you here saying bonjour from various parts of the world. John Wood says, look at your kids for living in the moment. Yeah, that's great advice, John. They are always in the moment for sure. And sometimes in enjoying it to the fullest. So, episode number 87. This is called, if I recall, sometimes I write the titles and then I forget exactly what they are because I go through so many iterations. The Private Paris They Let Me See. We talk a lot about hidden secrets of Paris, especially people like myself who are trying to flog Paris content of the hidden parts of Paris, the secrets, you know, the secret hidden gems and all of that. But some things you would never ever find unless you were in the right place at the right time. So today for this home edition, I thought I would gather a series of photos that I've taken over the years that represent and document the times that I was just in the right place at the right time, and through some turn of events, you know, there was a local resident or someone who let me through a door that would otherwise be closed, or, you know, a garden space. And so that's what this is about. And I've got 6 different locations to share with you here. David Dubois, thank you, my friend, he just reminded me of something that I always forget. Speaking of flogging, David Dubois just sent me a super chat. And for those of you watching live on YouTube right now, there are a couple of free ways that you can support this project that I'm very grateful for. That is, you can click like on this video right now, the little thumbs up. You can share this video either right now to social media or later, the replay after the fact, if you want to help spread the word. Those are free ways to support me. But another way is, as David Dubois did here, there's a little $ next to your chat box. And you can send an immediate tip or a donation if you want to help support me. And that is really, really important for us who are in this situation here, especially in the tourism industry. And I want to thank you so much, David Dubois. If you do send a super chat, your comment will be highlighted if you want to say something to grab my attention and make sure that I acknowledge it or receive the message, then you can do that. So big shout out to David. I appreciate you, buddy. You can also join my Patreon if you haven't done. I get the feeling that out of the 109 of you that are live right now, a good portion of you are already Patreon supporters, so I don't want to harp on that. But if you're new, you can find the link in the description of this video, and that's another great way to support me. I hope I'm not shaking the table with my legs. Another in-the-moment sip of coffee. In that same vein, I'm thinking like there's really no need to rush through these episodes. Sometimes I think, oh, well, if it's more than 30 minutes, people are gonna... No one cares, no one has an attention span for that. But at the same time, when I'm here in the moment, I always feel like I want to just extend it and spend a bit of time instead of just blasting through. So these are all the things, full transparency, that are going on in the back of my head. Joyce says, I'm here in the moment at 7 a.m. Must be a West Coaster. So why don't we jump into it? I've got a whole slew of photos that I've prepared. As I said, 6 different locations of where I was in the right place at the right time, and I got stupid lucky to find a hidden little piece of the city that I never knew existed and I may never see again. So I hope you enjoy this. We're going to start out with, let's pull up this Google Maps. Here we're in Montmartre. You can see Sacré-Cœur here on the right hand side and Place du Tertre in the center. And what I want to show you this time around is right about here on the Rue Gabrielle, where it intersects, there is the location of Picasso's very first home and very first studio in Paris. A lot of people are familiar with this right here, which is called Le Bateau Lavoir. I know plenty of my followers are very familiar with the Bateau Lavoir, and people go there and visit. It's part of my walking tour of Montmartre that I give people. But that was not his first Paris studio. The one that I've got circled here is the one. And that is 49 Rue Gabrielle. And I was there, this goes all the way back to 2012. But it still remains one of the most meaningful experiences. I had only been in Paris for a couple of years and just a huge fan of art. I studied it, fine arts in college. That was my major. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that. It's just around the corner from the Bateau Lavoir, but people walk right by the Rue Gabrielle, perhaps not knowing about it. So let's get started here. Let me get rid of this here. So this is the outside. There is a plaque there in brown, but it's pretty easy to miss. I missed it a few times, but that's number 49, and I was lucky enough to get in through that door because there happened to be a resident who opened the door, saw that I was interested in photographing the facade, and probably assumed that I was a Picasso fan, and he just said, "Do you want to come in and have a look?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I had no idea what to expect, and so I did make it in. This is so thrilling. This was one of my first absolute magical moments of Paris. So I want to pause here at the entryway because I blogged about this way back in 2012, 8 years ago. And I wanted to read an excerpt from that blog because I think it really captured at least how I perceived this experience the first time around. And I thought that I would read that. But Picasso arrived in Paris in 1900 from Barcelona. He was barely 19 years old, and the reason he came to Paris was an exciting one. There was the World's Fair of 1900, one of those huge, world expos that they would do. And Picasso had a painting hanging in the Grand Palais for that exhibition. So it must have been extremely exciting for this Spanish boy from Barcelona, all of 19 years old, to come with some friends to Paris and go to the Grand Palais and visit the gallery where his own painting was hanging for the expo. It must have been an extraordinary time. Sadly, that painting is gone, the painting that was hanging of Picasso's in the Grand Palais, because he eventually painted over it. So classic, tortured artist, I totally get it. I painted over a few of my canvases back in the day too. And so that painting doesn't exist, at least not unless you X-ray another version of it. And so thank you, Corinne Mateo, for your super chat. I really appreciate the donation. So he came here, he was Matisse at the same time was living in the 9th arrondissement. Oscar Wilde was over on the left bank living in his hotel, soon to pass away. The metro had just been installed in Paris, an exciting time. There was Art Nouveau everywhere. It was all the rage. Intellectuals were discussing Sigmund Freud's brand new theories about dream interpretation. So the turn of the century, 1900, must have been a really sweet spot for Picasso to see that version of Paris. Very exciting. And you know, Montmartre was all run down and dilapidated at that time, but he stayed here. It was in fact one of his friends, or a fellow Spaniard, allowed him to stay in his studio. So I'm going to switch over now to the blog post that I wrote in 2012. And one thing I should point out here as I read this excerpt is, for the theme of this blog post, I was trying to specifically use pigments or colors that painters would use. You know, so you'll hear very specific names of colors, and that was part of the theme of this post. So switching over to my text from earlier. I was in. As my ears and eyes adjusted to the new space, my first reaction was gratitude that the interior still had an old, unpolished feel to it. I loved that it was in need of a paint job. And judging from all the worn grooves and uneven humps in the floor tiles, I'd like to think they could be the originals from way back then. The air inside was still and brisk and had yet to be warmed by the pale zinc yellow of the sun coming through the south-facing windows. What caught my eye next was the wooden staircase, as successful as the entryway in exuding a rustic authenticity with a touch of Parisian grace. The building was dead quiet and void of any residents. I moved further into it as silently and respectfully as if I were tiptoeing through a sanctuary during Mass, and to the left hung a heavy stone plaque to confirm this particular church's patron saint. Sorry, I'm a little out of sync with the images. But we're going to get to the plaque. It said, here in 1900, Picasso had his first studio in Paris. So back to my blog post. While the sign evoked a desire to find his exact room, each nondescript door painted in its innocuous coat of dark burnt sienna seemed to mumble, "Nothing to see here, move along," leaving me only to guess at which one might have been his. I was nevertheless content to have already shared Picasso's entryway, and to have now slid my hand along his railing as I descended the curve of those time-worn stairs to the lower level. I found an equally silent space with more floral-themed tile work, an old utility sink, and a back door leading to a series of terraces. I doubt this porch was as bright and inviting in 1900, but I imagine he still would have come out here from time to time, a cigarette pinched between his pigment-stained fingers, while he took stock of his new life as a Parisian and searched for inspiration along the jagged October skyline. Turning back around, I was struck momentarily by the quiet dignity of this worn, ancient sink. It's thoroughly possible, I mused, that this was the only source of water in a building like this 112 years ago, a line of thinking that led to the enticing conclusion that Picasso himself would have likely used it, to clean his paintbrushes, perhaps. I reflected on this as my hand slid along the paint-chipped contours of the spigot and down to the catch basin. I stood beside the master himself in my mind as I watched him like a hologram scrub and scrape the studio utensils, which had most likely spent the day in contact with the canvas of Le Moulin de la Galette, his first painting in Paris and one that has since been considered a masterpiece. With his thoughts lost in the turpentine-scented contemplation that oil painters know so well, I recalled his famous dark, piercing eyes, and I wondered what sort of self-critique might be churning behind them as he stood bent over this sink. It was a cool moment in a series of cool moments, a wonderful case of luck and timing working in tandem to offer you a personal role in those formative events of Western culture, which as a student seemed to only exist on the pages of textbooks and the transparencies of overhead projectors. For a second, I brought to mind the image of my 1995 self in an auditorium of hundreds, listening to long art history lectures, and how that younger Corey, about the same age as the Picasso who rinsed paintbrushes at this spot, had no idea just how real that history would become for him later on. So there we go. That's my story. A little bit from my blog post on FrenchFryInParis.com. That blog post was called "Cleaning Brushes with Picasso." And so I hope you enjoyed that. And so that's our first just dumb luck experience that I was able to partake in just because someone let me through the door. And I got to walk through the original building here. Let me see what you all are saying. As you can see, my next image is about to fade in here. So we're going to be moving on. Margaret C. says, such a great story. Lucienne says, very cool. Joyce Adams says, lovely, thank you. Tammy Bohannon says, very poetic, Corey. What a joy to hear. Daniel Molden says, and that is the magic of travel. Pictures from overhead projectors brought to life. That's so true, Danielle. John Wood says, you can write, Corey. Joanne, similar sentiment. Thanks, everybody. I do like writing. I enjoy it. So, moving on, because we've got plenty of other things to see. Actually, staying in Montmartre. Not too far at all from where we were before. So you can see Sacré-Cœur in the lower right. So you can see that we're still very, very close to it. And this time around, what I want to show you is right here is a place that a lot of you know with that statue of the man Marcel Aimé. He's emerging from the wall. Okay, very photogenic spot. Le Passe-Muraille statue coming out of the wall. And there's a park there. And I was in the park photographing through the gate this really cool artists' commune. That's this gated residence where there is an organization that allows artists to get grants and subsidies, and they can live for a series of months in this complex. And it's called the Cité Internationale des Arts. And you can apply if you're an artist, and they'll basically let you live there for free. And I've always wanted to explore there. And one day I was taking photos, and this is a photo, actually, let me pull this up, of what I photographed through the gate. It was very enticing. So I was there, and again, just like the previous story, there was an old lady who lived there, a wife of one of the artists, and she called over to me. She said, do you want to come in? She was like, follow me over to the entrance of the gate and I'll let you in. Just because I was there and taking photos and seemed interested. And I said, absolutely. So this was quite a dream. And so this will be fun for me to share some of the photos I took. What's fun is that I was on my way to a tour. This was just before 10 a.m. This is after I got through the gate and the lady had allowed me in. And I had the countdown, it was a very dramatic situation because I only had like 10 minutes before I had to run to the meeting point of my tour. And this turned out to be such a special, unique experience. It's the only time in my history as a tour guide that I made the conscious decision to be late for my tour. I allowed myself to be late. I figured it's worth it to do that and enjoy this experience and savor it, and then just apologize to my clients for showing up late, which is the only time I've allowed myself to do such a thing. Thanks, Leslie, for that super chat. She says, thank you for this escape. Boy, we all need escapes nowadays. We are in the moment amidst our escape. So again, this is the entrance here, with a bit of a floral vibe to start things off. So yeah, the Cité Internationale des Arts. The organization began in 1965, and again, it's a space where you can live and work for free as an artist for at least 6 months or so. I mean, they've got some pretty elongated or prolonged residencies here. So you see here on the left coming up, there was some fun, I guess, trash, but I thought it was very photogenic for one reason. And there was this old, look at this, isn't that adorable? Old school little scooter, which is essentially a bike with a motor attached to it. And I thought that was great. And then to the right, you can see old pieces of marble and stone, and clearly artist's materials, like a sculptor's materials. So I thought that was really charming. I mean, what era does that thing? Look at the spring under the seat. What era does this thing come from? And maybe it wasn't thrown away because I see it's locked up, so it probably wasn't trash. And then it opens into this whole forest area. And again, this is all enclosed on all four sides. Like, the public is not meant to access this space. Jennifer Robinson says, once in a lifetime experience. Joyce Adams loves the tulips. Alonzo says, a great life is a happy accident. That's a good quote, Alonzo. Thank you for that. So I was alone here. And it was dead quiet, and it was just like, wow. I will probably never get to experience this portion of Montmartre. Of all the hundreds and hundreds of times that I've walked just on the outskirts of this space, and it was pretty exciting for me. These little cobblestone walkways. You can see on the left there's a little cottage coming up where one or maybe multiple artists are allowed to reside. Look at that. I mean, it's the countryside. It's like a camping site or something right in the middle of Montmartre. It was such a thrill. Now, no one invited me into that house specifically, but I'm not complaining. Liz Johnson says secret garden. Yeah, absolutely. And we're continuing through it. You're going to see that we eventually come against the wall of the Rue de l'Abreuvoir, which is the famous Maison Rose cafe and the beautiful architecture that everybody photographs, right? The pink houses and whatnot. And you'll see that, but from the other side, from the elevated wall of that street. Trish says, I want to live there. I know, tell me about it. Laura Poffenberger says it looks huge. Yeah, it is huge. It's enormous. Considering Montmartre itself isn't necessarily a big neighborhood. Oh, thanks, Nancy B. She sends a donation and says, thanks for your 87 tours of pure joy and for bringing me back to Paris when I can't be there. I appreciate that, Nancy. Thank you. I assume Nancy B is Nancy Brisson, our wonderful Freak member. So this is where you can see it's communal, it's bohemian. They just threw together some benches and chairs here where they have their smoke breaks and probably where they grab a bit of lunch outdoors in between art projects. So it's vast and there are several buildings. Like I said, it's a complex. Now behind us, if we turn around from this perspective, you're going to see in a second what I was talking about, looking over the Rue de l'Abreuvoir. And many of you will recognize some of the architecture here in this image coming up. So this was obviously not the summertime, things weren't in bloom. But you can see coming up on the left there, up the hill, is such a classic itinerary, and it's mine when I give people walking tours. And you can see a little bit of the Sacré-Cœur, if I'm not mistaken, there in the distance. So usually we only experience this street from the street level, but here I was actually up on that elevated portion, looking down on it, and it was so fun to get that additional perspective that I never thought I'd get. Sorry for the noise in the background, as I said, it's a little bit inevitable today. C. Fennel says, what a treasure to discover. Yeah, and Elise says, what a beautiful property to set up an easel. Ain't that the truth? Oh, Nancy B, I'm sorry. I guessed wrong. Nancy B is Nancy Betancourt. I'm glad that it's not Nancy Brisson, it's Betancourt from Florida. Thanks, Nancy, for getting me in line there. Heather Jackson says your favorite street. Yeah, that Rue de l'Abreuvoir is maybe pound for pound my favorite street in town. So this is off the Rue Norvins. Now I'm going to go back through in the description and put the addresses of these 6 locations from this episode, so you'll be able to find it. And moving on, now we're going to zoom across to the 7th arrondissement. You can see the Eiffel Tower is there. I was admiring some architecture in this neighborhood and just taking photos and probably a big grin on my face as usual. And an old lady, one of the residents, is just walking by, and she just turns to me and says, oh, what are you looking at? Oh yeah, the beautiful building, we got a lot of beautiful stuff here. And she gave me a very quick little once over of the architecture that she likes, and she says, I live here. I was like, wow, you're so lucky to live here. She says, would you like to see my apartment? Would you like to come up? I've got a nice view of the Eiffel Tower. And this is just this little old lady. She must have been 70, 80 years old. And I said, wow, are you kidding me? Absolutely. And what an amazing woman, because she'd only met me for like 2 minutes, and she invited me up. Let me show you here, turn on my little pencil thing. She lived essentially right in this area, on the Avenue de la Bourdonnais. And it was essentially the dream where we're looking at a beautiful building and all of a sudden someone says, hey, do you want to see my apartment? And so, of course, I was very polite. And once I was up there, I didn't take any photos of her apartment itself because I thought that would be, that would be a little bit rude. But I did snap a little bit of her street right at her front door. So this is before you even get into the building. So I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, the views from her windows upstairs are going to be dynamite. And they were. But there was a special secret object up there that she was going to share with me that I did not expect. And that's what makes this a lot more fun of a story. This is the inside of the building, pretty classic for a 7th arrondissement apartment building and a tiny little elevator. And when we got up, this was one of the views from her terrace, from her windows. So it was just like, absolute classic. And I couldn't believe my luck. I was like, 5 minutes ago, I was down on the street dreaming of these apartments. And all of a sudden, I'm in one. And she lives alone as far as I know. So, as I said, it was very trusting of her to let some 40-year-old dude just come up alone with her in her apartment. I really appreciated that. And what I love is, I love when these people aren't snobby about it. And it's almost like they understand how fortunate they are. And they appreciate sharing it with others who are appreciative. I suppose sometimes they're proud and they want to show off a little bit, which I totally get because that's what I would do with a view like this as well. Maybe she was just a little bit lonely that day. But I clearly, you know me by now, I clearly was very visibly appreciative and my jaw was on the floor and I was just so excited. She's like, yeah, go ahead, take some photos. And so I did. What I was not able to photograph, just out of courtesy and politeness, is her apartment was full of these big framed paintings and statues all over the place like you were in a museum. And it was such a collection, and I could only imagine that it was worth a lot of money. So I wish, I had photos of that, but I always said to myself, you know what, maybe I'm going to come back and see this lady one day. And I'm thinking now, due to recent events, how we're all more appreciative of being with each other and being kind to one another. I might just go ring her doorbell again one day and say, hey, do you remember me from a couple of years back? Would you want to grab coffee? Because she was really, really nice to me that day. Now, what she pulled out, though, before I left was extraordinary, and I was able to take a photo of it. And this is really where I get, I think it fits into the theme of what an absolute joy, what a pleasure this was, and a privilege. What this is it says Siege of Paris. It was from the days of the Commune in 1870 and 1871 when the Prussians invaded France and besieged Paris. And it was an extraordinary time. There were 133 days of famine as the Prussians surrounded Paris and tried to cut it off from its resources. And this says, at the top, you can see it says historical souvenir. And apparently you could purchase these, I assume soon after the war, the Franco-Prussian War, that basically lays out, it's like a commemorative piece. And it's in a frame under glass, just to give you an idea here. And it was absolutely extraordinary. And I was I was holding it in my hands. And I was just so thrilled. I want to zoom in a little bit here. What we're going to do is, if I can. So you can see on the upper left-hand corner, 1870, and then on the other corner it says 1871. On these two medallions here, on the left-hand side, it's Emperor Guillaume I, who was the leader of Germany/Prussia, essentially the enemy to the French. So that's Emperor Guillaume, and then on the other medallion to the right is Emperor Napoleon III, who was the leader of France at the time. So they've got those two emperors sort of head-to-head squaring it off. And it says the Siege of Paris from the 18th of September in 1870 to the following January of 71. And this was a terrible, terrible time in the history of Paris, for sure. And then here, I believe there were originally 9 flowers, actual little flowers, that I assume have some symbolic meaning of remembrance, perhaps. And they were attached to the center here. We'll get to what's beneath it, that little hunk of brown stuff there. But here, we've got the capitulation, easy for me to say. Thanks, Keith, for sending in the super chat. He says, thanks for taking us with you today. I appreciate it. So you can see Paris, Sedan, Metz, Strasbourg. It lists all the dates that the different cities capitulated or surrendered to the Prussians. And it lists other entry of the army, the Versailles army, which was the French army, entering in Paris to quell the uprising of the Parisians. But then let us move over here. This says 300 grams of bread. That's literally a piece of bread. So every one of these commemorative souvenir frames apparently took a piece of bread that would have been from the rationed provisions. So it says 300 grams of this bread after 5 hours of waiting in 12-degree weather, in cold weather. And that's extraordinary. I've seen other examples of this I've Googled it, and there, every single one has a piece of bread. And then over here, it says the price of provisions, food provisions. And I'm going to try to zoom you in here as much as I can. Because what we've got here is, right here, it says horse meat. They had to slaughter all of their horses, 65,000 horses. The Parisians had no choice but to eat all of their horses. And so where you would usually pick up, beef and veal and chicken and whatnot, all of a sudden it was horse. So what this says is half a kilo for, I can't see the price here because my screen is a little bit too small. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Oops, sorry. Can I zoom in at all? I guess I'm at max zoom. I think it's 12. I think it's 12 francs. But anyway, after that, you've got right underneath, that right there is chien. That's dog meat. Because they had to start eating dogs. They had to start eating cats. They had to start fishing the fish out of the public fountains, and people would boil the fish to survive. They ended up infamously opening up the Paris Zoo, and they had to slaughter all the exotic animals, and all those meats were sold at a crazy price. Now, keeping in that theme, right here, do you see that says rat? That's a rat. So one rat was 2 francs. I happen to know back then that a day laborer, an average sort of real sort of working class blue collar guy, maybe let's say a guy who was digging ditches, would make 2 francs per day was the average salary. So you literally would work all day long for that 2 francs, and you would spend every dime of it, every centime, on a rat to bring home to your family. Can you imagine? You can see, by the way, let me remove this, just above rat it says œuf, which is an egg. So 1 œuf was 5 francs. So just a single egg was 2.5 times the price of a rat. So you can see, which items were the most rare, right? Or the rarest, I should say. And then you got carrots and onions, and choux is cabbage, etc. But isn't that absolutely extraordinary? You can see, for example, dindon. Do you see right here? Hold on, let me show you this. Dindon is a turkey, essentially, and that was 150 francs. 150 francs. It was 75 times more than a rat just to get a hold of and so imagine if you're making 10 or 15 francs a week. Like, you're not going to spend 10 weeks of your salary on one turkey. So it became for the extremely wealthy. So anyway, I think we've dwelled enough on that. Let me bring this back to the proper size. So there you go. Thank you to this woman who allowed me to get beautiful views of the Eiffel Tower in her 7th arrondissement apartment, and to allow me to hold this very unique and beautiful souvenir of the Commune of Paris, La Commune. Let me see what you all are saying. Elise says extraordinary times. Belinda just says, oh my God. Yeah. Christina says, new meaning to ratatouille. That is absolutely the truth. So that was the Commune. Let's move on. This next one here, I'll show you where it is. Not far from the Luxembourg Gardens at all, on the Rue de Vaugirard. It is right about here. Do you see where it says there's a church called Saint-Joseph-des-Carmes, Saint-Joseph-des-Carmes. This is a church nobody ever goes to. It's actually enclosed behind a wall. And you can see it's just a little bit west of the Luxembourg Gardens there on the Rue de Vaugirard. And this gets very interesting. I used to give tours for a tour company many years ago. And included in this tour, I decided to ask the priests of this church, Saint-Joseph-des-Carmes, if I could access their private crypt. I had heard tales of an underground catacombs of sorts that was a shrine to priests that were slaughtered during the French Revolution. So just a real quick catch-up. One of the bloodiest events during the French Revolution, with the guillotine, Marie Antoinette, all of that, was something called the September Massacre. And it happened in 1792 when angry mobs were just moving from one prison to the next, one church to the next, and just slaughtering their detainees. A lot of them were priests. A lot of them were members of the clergy that did not agree to renounce Christ and go along with the new republic, basically claiming that God didn't exist, Christianity no longer existed. So many of the clergy members refused to do that, and they stuck to their beliefs and their principles. So about 150 of the priests or so were kept in this church like prisoners. And in September of 1792, the angry mob, the revolutionaries, came through and slaughtered 116 of the priests. I don't have a lot of photos from when I was inside the church, regrettably, but I can show there are a few beautiful details. There were painted ceilings and some chapels that are quite spectacular. So this is just one example of one of the muraled ceilings. And then I'll show you the crypt that lies underneath it. This right here is a statue by Bernini, designed by Bernini, the very famous Italian Baroque sculptor. And I love it. So that's near the altar in the transept. But if you descend down, this is what I'm talking about. This is the private Paris they let me see. I had to ahead of time talk to the priest. I had an interview with the head priest of this church. And I wanted to explain to him why I wanted to bring people down here as a tour guide. And he bought it. I mean, he understood that it was out of respect and out of, historical appreciation. And so he said, yes, come here, a few times a week. You can, there'll be a nun who will grab the keys and allow you and lead you downstairs deep into the crypt. And what this is, I'll start this again for you. You can see there's sort of an altar there on the side, and then I'll show you one of the other side of the room. And it's dead quiet. Nobody's allowed. The public is never allowed down here. It's just for private prayer and reflection. So do you see here, there towards the left center, there's a display case. And we're going to zoom in, and you can start to see that it is literally some of the skulls. This is some of the human remains of the 116 priests that were slaughtered in 1792 by the revolutionaries. And it's really quite moving. And like I said, it is essentially a private catacombs. And I didn't even know this existed. And then I found out, and then I was lucky enough to come visit this and show people back in my early days. This is another room to the side. It has portraits of some of the priests and the remains there. And the plaque on the bottom says they were martyrs. They essentially died because they refused to give up their religion, their beliefs. So it's spooky, it's eerie, like a lot of these catacomb type spaces are, but it's absolutely, it was like a Da Vinci Code experience, to be honest. Just really extraordinary. Let me see what you all are saying. Elizabeth says creepy. Yeah, it is. John Wood says a revolution reliquary. Ellen Corradini asks if the church itself is open to the public. Yeah, the church is open to the public, to my knowledge. I haven't been in a while. They changed the entrance. They put up higher security after the terrorist attacks years ago. But yeah, I think if you play your cards right at certain times of the day, I think you can access the church. You probably will never, unless you really sweet talk somebody, you may not be allowed down in this crypt, but it does exist beneath the altar. Now, this, real quickly, there are other parts of the church that I used to include on my tour. The church claims that those streaks right there in rust-colored red, it's the only case in Paris of blood, actual blood from the weapons of the angry mob. And they rested their weapons against this stone wall. And that's why you can see they redid the room, but they left that one piece of the bare stone wall encased in honor of these martyrs. And so, yeah, here in the church of Saint-Joseph-des-Carmes, if you're ever able to get the private access, this is extraordinary. To my knowledge, this is the only example of actual blood from the French Revolution still staining the stone of that wall. And there's a whole story behind, the drama that played out, but very, very brave priests and other members of the clergy. So there you go. Just steps from Luxembourg Gardens. Who knew? Heron says, chills. Leslie says, how extraordinary. Joyce Adams says, really interesting. I'm glad. MS Shriv says, just joining, first time live viewer. I love these videos. Well, thank you. Thank you to you, M. Shriv, I guess I should call you. Really appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, who knew that there are actually purported literal blood stains from the French Revolution still, that I would have never known about if it weren't for these chance happenings. So here we are still at the Luxembourg Gardens on the bottom of your screen. And next we're going to talk about something that many of you know and love. It's good old Église Saint-Sulpice, just above the park. Saint-Sulpice is a place that I thought I knew. I thought I knew it inside and out, really. I've been there so many damn times. This is a nice little dusk, blue hour view that I took of it. And many of you that love Saint-Sulpice and have been there, you know that right when you enter, if you turn to the right, there are the very famous frescoes by Delacroix. So this is one of them. This is Jacob wrestling the angel. And these are just iconic highlights of Saint-Sulpice. By Delacroix, finished in 1861. 3 beautiful paintings, 2 on the sides and 1 on the ceiling. But if you look in this image here, right at the bottom of this image, there are doors underneath one of the Delacroix's murals. Those doors, for the 10 years that I've been living in Paris, have been closed 99.9% of the time. But I was there one day on my own, and the doors were open. And I said, well, dagnabbit, I'm going in. And so I did. And it turns out that through those doors, there's another chapel that is private and closed to the public. And it happened to be open that day just because there was a temporary exhibit in the center. And this chapel is called the Peristyle Chapel. It is situated under the south tower of the church, or the right-hand tower as you enter the building. It was originally, this space under the tower would have had a spiral staircase that would have allowed the priests and whatnot to be led up to the upper levels of the church, not just the bells, but the upper concourses and whatnot, the platforms. But they decided along the way to not put a staircase here, but turn it into a chapel. And it was called the Peristyle Chapel, and it was specifically a chapel used for when you had people who were dying, or they were terminally ill, or there was sort of like an emergency last rites ceremony that needed to be performed. Priests would be called from their homes late in the middle of the night. And so when the priests entered late at night through the church, they could just very quickly take a right-hand turn right around the corner and be in this chapel. And so that's what it was used for. But then it was closed to the public forever and ever and ever. You can see the doors here on the bottom right, which is where you can enter underneath the fresco of Delacroix. And those doors weren't originally there. When the chapel was in use, that's where the altar was. And that's why there's a beautiful stone relief up above where the chapel would have been. And that chapel represents the passing or the death of Saint Joseph. And we'll zoom in on that in a moment. But on the left, you can see a niche statue. There are 4 of those, and they represent hope, humility, religion, and resignation. And let me go through and give you some other images here. I'm going to zoom in on the relief, the death of Saint Joseph. You can see Joseph there in the center, angels up above. Really beautiful. Phyllis Cartwright says, always look for open doors. Yeah, I never pass one up, Phyllis. Gail says, really enjoying this tour and presentation. Thank you, Gail. I'm glad that you joined. I'm so glad to have so many of you with me here as we're living in the moment and enjoying ourselves, transported to Paris as we all need and we deserve. This is looking up. Love the beautiful Corinthian columns and almost like a Roman Pantheon style ceiling. Stunning. And this is just steps away from the Delacroix that I've been to 100 times. You just never know what else is hiding. These are the floors. Beautiful inlaid marble flooring, my goodness. And not just that, but look at this next image, because you're going to see it's not just a grid pattern. Do you see how those beautiful curves, I mean, think of carving out each individual tile to make sure that it fits with that theme. Absolutely extraordinary. I'm going to pause here. I want to thank Ellen Corradini for sending me a super chat donation. She says, this hour is the highlight of my week. Thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate that. I mean, that really means a lot to me, Ellen. It's a lot of work to prepare these things, but I've never regretted it, because as long as there's an appreciative audience on the other end, then it's more than worth it. So thank you for that super chat. I appreciate the support from everybody. Here's a painting that has survived. This is the current altar of that Peristyle chapel. And again, it's not used as a chapel anymore. There happened to be a modern art exhibit in the center of the space, which is why I was allowed in. This is a painting called The Apparition of the Lord to Mary Magdalene. And to the right of it, near the window, that essentially would be one of the facade windows of Saint-Sulpice looking out over the famous fountain in the square. These are not Delacroix, but they're beautiful in their own right. Look at those. Wow. 2 on each side and 1 on the ceiling. Absolute gems. Just gorgeous. So there you go, right under my nose, next to the Delacroix. Just what a shame. I mean, in a way, it's a shame that the public doesn't get to enjoy all of this stuff, but I guess they have their reasons. Anyway, if you ever see that door open, definitely go through it. There once in this chapel was a beautiful ornate carved organ used for services, and the organ was so beautiful they decided to transfer it to Versailles. So it's in the Chateau of Versailles somewhere, the organ from the chapel here at Saint-Sulpice. I've got one more space to show you, the 6th and last piece of private Paris. And it's here on Ile de la Cité. This is another place that some of you know very well, just north of Notre Dame, on the Rue Chanoinesse. This place, Au Vieux Paris d'Arcole. You know it well. Let me remove my little thingy-ding. So this is the very famous Instagrammable place with the wisteria in the springtime. So these are a couple of my photos of the exterior. Now you are allowed to, and I encourage you to, by all means, they're so nice, the staff, you are allowed at any time of the day to walk in and look at the interiors. The dining rooms are beautiful. And the dining rooms themselves are a little bit of quote-unquote private Paris. But anybody can access them. What I want to show you next is, I was there talking to one of the managers. His name's Freddie. I know some of you know Frédéric from Au Vieux Paris d'Arcole, particularly Sue-Ann Hum, I know, painted a portrait of Freddie. I was just enjoying, I brought some clients in there to look at the dining rooms upstairs, beautiful. But there was always a curtain closing off one side of one of the dining rooms. And I always wondered what was behind the curtain. And one day, Freddie allowed me to go through it. And what I found beyond the curtain, beyond the dining rooms, beyond the restaurant itself, was pretty spectacular and unexpected. So there's this beautiful old crickety staircase that makes its way up. Excuse me. Love the colors here. And I got a spiral shot next. Look at that great combo of the wooden stairs and the it's not brick, but it's that beautiful tiling. So what it is, it's a secret historic apartment. There's an apartment that you can rent tucked away in the back courtyards beyond the restaurant, Au Vieux Paris d'Arcole. And you can rent this thing through the restaurant. All you got to do is contact them and ask about availability. And it's got some of this old furniture, almost as if you were in the restaurant itself. You got the chandelier and the old wood beam ceilings. But it's authentic. I mean, this space must be from, at least a few hundred years ago. And you can live here. You can stay here. Got the old former fireplace, and the furniture is fantastic. There are all these little images, framed paintings everywhere around. Dreama Toll Perry sends a donation. Thank you, Dreama. You're such a sweetheart. She says, what a delight. A delightful getaway you provide, Corey. Ricky Beltran says, a perfect start to the weekend. Appreciate that, Ricky, your donation. Thanks, everybody. You're wonderful. So yeah, keep this in mind if you want a really unique spot, particularly if you're a fan of the restaurant or just being near Notre Dame. There's one of the bedrooms. And again, that curtain remained closed 100 times, and then randomly they let you through and you realize, wow, Paris has so much more going for it than even we understand. This is a view out into a tiny little courtyard from one of the windows of the apartment. Talk about secluded. You don't hear a sound back then. You don't hear any tourists or anything. So it's a nice life. And here in the staircase, as you descend back down, beautiful old tapestry and some other details. We made our way all the way down to the medieval basement. So I've just got a few more photos of that to show you. So yeah, folks, this is the secret Paris that they allowed me to see. And of course, it's exciting because, as you all know, any day walking down any street in Paris, you never know when these little experiences are going to present themselves to you. That's from the basement, beautiful old staircase. And then back to the entrance. So that's Au Vieux Paris d'Arcole. I highly recommend you eat here, by the way, too. It's maybe a little on the pricey side, but worth it. Everybody's great there. Just beautiful people. And there we have it. That was episode number 87, everybody. And you can see here a little collage, of course, of some of the things that we saw. Let me see what everybody is saying here. Let's put it back on me. Whew. Let me zoom out here. How do I? There we go. Coffee's all gone. Daniel Molden sends a super chat. We learn so much from you every week. Very appreciative of the work and research you put into every tour. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Danielle. You're such a beautiful member of our community. I really appreciate it. Boy, the neighbors didn't make too much noise today, did they? Everything worked out. The sky is not as blue as before. But I want to thank you all for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this. As I mentioned at the top of this episode, we're getting closer to me being in Paris on the streets. I'm taking my time, but we'll get there very soon. Should be exciting. Coat's not cooperating here. Let's see what you all are saying here. Bab says, thanks for the wonderful tour. Mountain Bruce, great tour, Corey. Appreciate that. Angie Parr says, what a fun journey. Merci. Thanks, Angie. Everybody's saying thank you. I appreciate that. Elizabeth says, can't wait to see you in Paris, Corey. Likewise, Elizabeth, likewise. I'm so glad that all of you showed up. Phyllis Cartwright, in reference to Paris, she says, no rush, Corey. We're with you wherever you are. That's so sweet. Lauren Tonk says it was a fascinating episode. Leslie T says, fantastic. I could do this all day. Well, the good news is if you're a Patreon supporter, if you're a member on Patreon, then we're going to continue the party, as it were. I'm going to go grab some cold, bubbly champagne from the house, and we're going to have a champagne chat over in our Facebook group, the Cafe Chats group. So do that in about 10 minutes from now. It's just going to be me today. There won't be a guest, but it'll be a nice way for me to check in with all of you and see how you're all doing. If you're not a Patreon member, that's a great way to support me, and you can access some of those private events that we have live and other bits of content and whatnot. So that link's in the description. I think that's about all I want to say. So I think we did a good job. I don't even know how long it was. Oh, almost an hour. So we definitely took our time. We were in the moment today. Deep breath. I hope you're all doing well. We're not exactly out of the woods yet, are we, with all of this? But I hope you're doing okay in here and up here, as always. And without further ado, let's pop on over to Facebook and have our private champagne chat and catch up. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Lots of love coming through the interwebs today. Thanks, take care, and I will catch you on the next episode. All the best to you. If you can't bring yourself to Paris, I'll keep bringing it to you. All the best stuff that I can find and the best experiences coming your way. I promise you that. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.